Thank you. Such amazing talk so far. So incredible. We have next, we have the privilege of hearing from Jane Birch, who is the author of Discovering the Word of Wisdom and numerous other writings on the Word of Wisdom. I'm sure most of you, if you've ever studied the Word of Wisdom, you've probably seen Jane's writings floating out there somewhere. She's been an invited speaker around the world and has written for numerous publications, including Meridian Magazine. She's the oldest of 9 children, and she is the aunt to lots of beautiful nieces and nephews. She lives in Provo, Utah, where she served as assistant director of the BYU Faculty Center since 1996. As a faculty developer, she has seen a lot of different kind of diets through lots of people. And she says rarely do these faculty members come in and ask for something healthy. But she has a PhD, she says, but it's not in nutrition, though she's discovered that you don't need advanced degrees to learn how to eat the way God intended us to. Isn't that beautiful? I love that. In fact, she says, given the current academic prejudices, having a PhD in nutrition can sometimes be a stumbling block. She has a testimony of the gospel, a love for a Savior, a passion for a whole food plant-based diet, and a joy for helping others discover the word of wisdom. So please welcome Jane Birch.
Wow, such a pleasure to be here. So wonderful to look out and see all of you. I really wish I had time to spend time with each of you to get to know your stories, feel your heart, your desires. I love that Sister today shared with me that she's here because she wants the promises of the Word of Wisdom. How many of you would like the promises of the Word of Wisdom? I love those promises too. My story started out in 2011. I didn't have any major health issues at the time that could be influenced by diet. But I woke up one morning and I saw a show on CNN, and it was about the last heart attack. It was about a heart attack-proof diet. I didn't have any risk factors for heart disease, but I was well aware heart disease kills more Americans and more people, at least in developed countries and now pretty much throughout the world, than any other disease. The thought that we could totally prevent this disease, now when I say heart disease, number one killer, think the amount of deaths, the amount of money, the amount of resources, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. The amount of suffering, turmoil, inconvenience, loss of productivity, all to be prevented simply by eating a different way. Well, this intrigued me. And when I discovered it wasn't just heart disease, it was diabetes, it was strokes, it was kidney disease, arthritis. It was virtually every major chronic disease. I thought, I've got to eat this way. This is the way we're meant to eat. I've got to eat this way. I was fired up. But what fired me up even more was when I opened to Doctrine and Covenants, section 89, and I noticed it was the same diet. It had been there all along. God was very sneaky. He stuck it right there in the middle of the Doctrine and Covenants thinking we wouldn't notice it. Well, guess what? We're on to him. That's what this conference is about today. I'm really delighted to share with you. Brigham Young. Brigham Young tells us that when the School of the Prophets was inaugurated, when the first revelation was given to the Lord to his servant Joseph, do you want to guess? You got it. It was the Word of Wisdom. The School of Prophets was formed in January of 1833. Just 1 month later, here comes this very important revelation, the Word of Wisdom. Brigham Young concludes, so we see that almost the very first teachings the first elders of this church received were as to what to eat, what to drink, and how to order their natural lives, that they might be united temporally as well as spiritually. This is the great purpose which God has in view in sending to the world by his servants the gospel of life and salvation. It will teach us how to deal, how to act in all things, and how to live with each other to become one in the Lord. You know, as important as physical health is, the word of wisdom is about so much more. It's teaching us more about how to become one with our Savior. Have you ever thought of the word of wisdom in that light? Well, when the story of the word of wisdom is told, this account from Zebedee Coltrane is often recounted. He says, when the word of wisdom was first presented, there were 20 of the 21 who used tobacco, and they all immediately threw their tobacco and pipes into the fire. Well, I heard this story repeatedly when I was growing up. I don't know about you. And of course, it made total sense to me that they would immediately get rid of this very obnoxious and filthy habit the second they learned it was the will of God. And I naively assumed that that was the last any of them ever touched those substances. Well, I was wrong. You know, if we think today it's hard to give up sugar, it's actually very difficult to give up alcohol, tobacco, coffee, and tea. And it took the saints nearly 100 years to really come to the standard of worthiness that we assume today. This connection lost. Let me get this here. This is one of my favorite stories from that first 100 years. This is Heber J. Grant. Heber J. Grant was a young apostle at the time he recounted this. He was passionate about the word of wisdom. He was like Cassidy and Jordan in his day, just really passionate. He would often preach on the word of wisdom, but oftentimes it was a frustrating experience. And he told this in 1895 General Conference. He says, I confess to you that I have been humiliated beyond expression to go to one of the stakes of Zion and to stand up and preach to the people and call upon them to obey the word of wisdom, and then to sit down at the table of the president of the state after having preached with all the zeal, energy, and power that I possess, calling upon the people to keep the commandments of God, and have his wife ask me if I like a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. You can imagine how frustrated he was. Well, it wasn't just church members, but church leaders who had a difficult time with these substances. Even general authorities, even apostles, even the prophets, as you'll learn when you read Saints, Volume 2. You know, it was really challenging, and the Lord gave it not by commandment, by constraint, initially. And so it's very, very difficult. And I wonder, it's interesting that even today, many members of the church have difficulty fully keeping even these prohibitions that are clearly stated. Last year, I read Jan Reese's book, The Next Mormons, and in it, she talks about a survey given to over 1,000 self-identified Latter-day Saints and over 500 former Latter-day Saints. Well, of course, it's no surprise that many of the former Latter-day Saints don't keep these prohibitions. But what was really disappointing and discouraging to me was to see how many self-proclaimed faithful Latter-day Saints actually do not adhere to all the prohibitions. She recounts, for example, only 61.8% of current Temple Recommend holders say that they have not consumed any of the substances forbidden by the word of wisdom in the last 6 months. Does that surprise you? Between 10 and 20% of Temple Recommend holders report that they consume tea, coffee, alcohol, or tobacco in the last 6 months. Right? When you look at these statistics, I kind of wonder, is it possible that maybe some of this has to do with what we read in the media all the time about the so-called health benefits of these substances? And I say so-called, actually I do think there are some health benefits to these substances, health benefits to everything. Is there a health benefit to Snickers? A Snickers bar. A Snickers bar could save your life. When? If you were starving and that was all? No, there's health benefits to everything. And of course we read, according to the media, wine is high in antioxidants, reduces inflammation, promotes healthy gut bacteria. All true, right? Does it say anything about what else it does to you? and the havoc it wreaks in the lives of families. Coffee lowers your risk of type 2 diabetes, Parkinson's disease, breast cancer, and prostate cancer. Tea protects your bones, boosts your immune system, helps digestion. You know, even smoking has some health benefits. Yes, nicotine lowers your risk of knee replacement surgery, Parkinson's disease, obesity, and the risk of death after some heart attacks. And let's not forget marijuana, all the rage today. Helps stop cancer cells from spreading, lowers risk of Alzheimer's disease, treats glaucoma, relieves arthritis, decreases anxiety, reduces severe pain and nausea from chemo. I hope my bishop's not here today. I'm not trying to encourage any of you to take up these substances. I'm just saying this can be confusing even to Latter-day Saints. Likewise, when we read the Dietary Council and we notice that the Dietary Council seems to contradict what we read on the internet, we start to wonder, well, maybe that Dietary Council, that was good for Joseph Smith's day, but it really doesn't make sense in our day. After all, we now understand that diet high in carbohydrates, especially grains, is bad for our health. That the wheat has changed and is no longer good for us. That the people in Joseph Smith's time, well, of course, they ate an enormous amount of meat, so of course they were told to eat it sparingly. Doesn't apply today. We have refrigeration now, so no need to restrict meat in winter. Well, before we dispense with the Lord's advice so readily, I just want to remind us of the scripture that George just reminded us, and that is that the Lord told us specifically when he revealed the word of wisdom that this was given to all saints in the last days. Raise your hand if you're a saint in the last days. Still, it seems I get it, it's hard. And frankly, I feel like this was given specifically to our day. Now, why am I saying that? Did you know that the saints in Joseph Smith's day, they didn't even really benefit from the Dietary Council and the Word of Wisdom? Why was that? Well, their diet already largely conformed to the Dietary Council, so they didn't see this part of the revelation as actually revealing anything. It's like you're reading a scripture that says the sky is blue. That doesn't come across as a commandment to you, does it? Well, maybe it does today when we see how polluted our skies are and you think, oh, maybe God ordained the skies to be blue. But you get what I'm saying. They read the word of wisdom, grain, the staff of life. That was their diet. They didn't think of it. It's only in our day where we really have a choice about what we eat that we really need this wisdom, because the saints in Joseph Smith's day, they had little choice about what they ate. Well, our day is very different, and not because the wheat has changed, because the circumstances have changed, and God saw our time, and God told us specifically the reason why he was giving us this wisdom. In consequence of the evils and designs which do and will exist in the hearts of conspiring men in the last days, I have warned you and forewarned you by giving you this word of wisdom by revelation. Now, I think we're pretty much aware of the evils and designs of conspiring men when it comes to pushing substances that are not good for us, specifically alcohol, tobacco, harmful drugs. But let's consider also how much effort goes in, time, money, resources, people, into getting us to eat foods that are not healthy for us. I offer the following slides as examples. No, I'm not trying to encourage anyone to completely ignore the dietary advice in the Word of Wisdom. I'm just saying that all of us are pretty familiar about why it's so hard to pay attention to eating healthy foods and not the unhealthy foods in the face of so much temptation. No wonder so many of us have chronic disease. It's hard, right? What was God thinking? What was God thinking when he send us down this day and age. And we have to face this. Well, you know, at least we're really helped by the platform given to us by the early saints. It took them decades to give alcohol, tobacco, coffee, and tea, but think what a foundation. Those of us who grew up in the church and never partook of those substances, we didn't have to fight that battle. We have other battles in our day, right? The pornography, you know, easy access to gambling, easy access to how many flavors of ice cream out there? Granted, before I changed my diet, ice cream was my very favorite food, and no, it's not going to kill you if you have a few bites here and there. But the thing is, in our day, we can eat only ice cream. We can if we want to, right? That's dangerous, folks. We have to go back to the self-discipline that Jordan was trying to teach us about. It's not easy. Well, I've been deeply impressed. That when people I'm hearing from Latter-day Saints who are really concerned now about the chronic disease they have when they're turning to the Lord for answers, I'm very impressed by how many times the Lord turns their attention to the word of wisdom. So I thought today I would share with you just a few very short excerpts from just a very few of the stories that are posted on my website, Discovering the Word of Wisdom, from Latter-day Saints talking about their journey. This here is Carol Wolf. She found herself very overweight and very crippled with ill health. Very, very low function. She knew things had to change. This is what she said. She said, I knew it had to be a lifestyle change. I picked up my scriptures. I turned to section 89 of the Doctrine and Covenants and whispered softly, help me to understand what this is really telling me. With those words, things were about to change. You can see the change, can't you? She lost the weight. She regained her health, something that didn't seem possible. And she even published her story in the Enzyme. This here is Kevin Tunstall. He was bishop of his ward in New Zealand when he was diagnosed with prostate cancer. He felt devastated. He didn't know what to do. He recalls, I spent the next day trying to think my way through the situation, and the more I thought, the more confused I became. That night I ended up at the New Zealand temple where I pled with the Lord. I have a family who's been through so much, Father. I have a ward that needs me, and I have a job that I'm finding a challenge. Suddenly, I remembered my patriarchal blessing, which promised me two gifts. The ability to solve my own problems and the gift of discernment to choose wisely. I said to the Lord, I have these gifts. I need to use them. Please help me. I stared down on my lap, and the scriptures I was holding opened to section 89. My heart started racing. I felt God was telling me, this is an answer to the problem. Read it, and you can solve it. Well, fortunately, Bishop Tunstall did read it. It wasn't easy, but he did solve it, and he recovered completely from prostate cancer. Katie Johnson and her beautiful family. We see beautiful people out there. We just don't know the heavy health burden many of them are under. Katie suffered for years from health problems, weight gain, fad diets. It all led to feelings of hopelessness and despair. And finally, she was driven to go to the Lord. Katie says, she says, at the end of the second fast, I received a specific and detailed blessing guiding me to continue to seek his will, that he was not hiding it. He's not hiding it, brothers and sisters. I was also told that when I opened my heart completely, I would need to be prepared to do difficult things that I did not expect and did not desire. Could that be why some of God's advice is hidden from us? It may be things that are difficult, things we do not expect, things we do not desire. Could that be why it seems to be hidden? She continues, After a friend encouraged me to pray and ponder the word of wisdom, I opened to D&C 89 and began to read. As I did, the Spirit poured down on me that this is what my Heavenly Father had been trying to tell me and wanted me to know. I sobbed as I realized I had just received direct revelation and felt the love of a Heavenly Father who so directly and specifically answered my questions. Katie followed those directions, and she would recover from her health problems. This is Brent Johnson. Brent suffered from years and years of migraines and other health issues. He says, as I prayed about my situation, I felt impressed by one single phrase. What do the scriptures say about health? I immediately turned to D&C 89 and reread the word of wisdom. It was very clear to me that the diet I was following was the opposite of what the Lord was teaching. It's not easy to change your diet when it's the opposite of what the Lord is teaching, right? But that's exactly what Brent did. His migraines went away. How worth it is that? Who's had a migraine? How worth it is that? I mean, I've had occasional, but to have it a lot, health issues also went away. I don't even have time to read all that Candace Bissell was going through with her health issues. Look at this beautiful woman. It wasn't weight primarily, it was other things. It was such a big struggle for her. She felt incapacitated. She was driven to so much despair. She told the Lord she would do anything. This is what she remembers. She says, about a year after I started earnestly following promptings from Heavenly Father, my running partner suggested that I try a popular fad diet where you eat almost no carbs, but lots of meat and fat at each meal. I decided to give it a try. But almost instantly I had a guilty feeling inside. It perplexed me. Why should I feel guilty about eating this much meat? I began praying about the fad diet. The inspiration I received was to read the word of wisdom. My first thought was, the word of wisdom? Well, I lived that perfectly. Well, I couldn't have been more wrong. I read and reread the passages and they screamed out to me, eat whole, fresh vegetables in their season. Eat fruit in their season. Grains should be the staff of life. Eat meat so sparingly that you only eat it in times of famine or extreme cold. Wow. This is not what Candace was expecting. This is not what she desired. But she did it. And the health benefits she had, these things, almost all completely disappearing, were certainly well worth it to her. Well, most of us have believed that all we need to do to keep the word wisdom was to abstain from alcohol, tobacco, coffee, tea, and harmful drugs. And surely this is true in terms of the minimum standard. But is it true that this is all we need to do for the type of health that we want? Fortunately, as Cassidy showed us earlier, the Lord has much more advice in the word of wisdom. And as the Stoddards showed us, the dietary advice by pure word count is actually just about twice as long as the prohibitions. So we've got a lot of great advice here. And of course, church leaders, and all the time, they've been desperately trying to get us to give up alcohol, tobacco, coffee, drink. It's all they can do to preach that part of it. In the meantime, they've never told us, has anyone ever heard once, a church leader say, by the way, you can ignore the rest of the advice in D&C 89. No. Unfortunately, there's lots of blessings too. Lots of promises. I love that the word of wisdom is a principle with promise. And there's beautiful, beautiful principles, beautiful promises. So, let's take a quick look at the dietary principles in the word of wisdom. There's only 3. It's not too hard. 1, eat wholesome plants with prudence. 2, use meat sparingly and only in certain times. 3, make grain the staff of life. How hard can that be, brothers and sisters? How hard can that be for us to understand? But yes, it's been hidden. It's been hidden. We can unhide it. So let's talk about these principles. Now remember, a principle Our principles like keep the Sabbath day holy. It's not a list of do's and don'ts. We shouldn't expect a list of do's and don'ts from the Word of Wisdom. We should expect principles. We need to understand those principles through prayer, through research, so that we can apply them specifically in our lives. The first dietary principle found in verses 10-11. Again, verily I say unto you, all wholesome herbs God hath ordained for the constitution, nature, and use of man. Every herb in the season thereof, and every fruit in the season thereof, all these to be used with prudence and thanksgiving. Herbs. Jordan talked about this. Herbs. According to the 1828 Webster's Dictionary, the word herb comprehends all the grasses and numerous plants used for culinary purposes. In other words, herbs are plants, which is just what the footnote in Doctrine and Covenants says. Herbs. Wholesome. Tending to promote health, favoring health. Okay? So the Lord ordained plants that promote health and favor health for our constitution, nature, and use. That's the principle. We can prayerfully study it. We can do research in scientific literature. We can review the clinical evidence to help us understand what are wholesome plants. Because again, the Lord doesn't give a list of the wholesome plants and the not wholesome plants actually in the Word of Wisdom. If you read any nutrition book, how thick are they? They're about this thick. How thick is the Word of Wisdom? Well, it's not even thick. It's just short. Isn't that beautiful? The Lord's economy. He gives it to us to understand. Well, some of them are no-brainers. I'm going to suggest these are no-brainers. We got here whole vegetables, whole fruits, whole grains, whole legumes. Are these wholesome plants? Do they promote health? That's not a trick question. I hope everyone agrees. Yeah, these are easy, right? Wholesome plants. Why? They contain the full package the Lord has made. All of the vitamins, all the nutrients, all the phytochemicals. Nothing is missing. Yes, these are the wholesome plants. On the other side, equally easy, we got poppy plants, marijuana, other psychoactive plants. They are plants, right? They're plants. They meet that part of it. They're plants. But are they wholesome? Do they promote health? I think, again, hopefully all of us agree, no, these are not the wholesome plants God talked about. So we got on the one side, obviously yes, obviously no. But guess what is about 95% of the grocery store? Something in the middle, right? Something in the middle. That is processed foods ahoy, right? So processed foods. These are all plant foods, but they're not the whole plant. Who was it? Both the Stoddard and Jordan talked about, man getting in there. And I actually don't think man getting in there is all bad all the time. I'm glad man got in there. Now we do surgeries and all kinds of things. We build skyscrapers. Skyscrapers are not natural, houses, But when it comes to food and we're taking out the nutrients from the food and we're putting in things that are not good for us, are these now wholesome plants? Do they favor health? Well, I'm not going to tell you. Nobody's going to tell you. Your bishop's not going to tell you. But here's where you yourself can prayerfully study the principle and you can apply it yourself. Are these wholesome plants? Do they promote health? What about the most processed foods on the entire planet? Sugar. So this is pure carbohydrate. Or how about oil? Pure fat, Crisco. Pure fat. These are processed foods. They're almost pure, but they're not ultra-processed foods. Now, what about these? Are these wholesome plants? They promote health again. The Word of Wisdom doesn't say, it gives us a principle. But we might have to go to scientific literature. We might have to experiment on our body. We might have to pray to find out. But that's exactly what we can do. Let's go on to principle number 2. Yea, flesh also the beast and the fowls of the air, I, the Lord, have ordained the use of man with thanksgiving. Nevertheless, they are to be used sparingly. And it's pleasing unto me that they should not be used only in times of winter, or of cold, or of famine. So the first part of this principle is sparingly. What does sparingly mean to you? Here I love the poetics, I'll say, of the Word of Wisdom. The Lord doesn't define sparingly for us. We get to pray about it, think about it, research. But there's a lot of different definitions. And for example, I love one by Hugh Nibley. He says, sparingly, the word wisdom means to spare the life of the animal. Isn't that beautiful? Another definition I like to use myself is, think of it like a spare tire. You have it in the back of your car. You take it out when it's needed. And of course, there's many good dictionary definitions too. Here's some from Webster's. And the Oxford English Dictionary says, in restricted or limited manner, very moderately, scantily, slightly. We get to decide, and I love that. I love that we get to decide. The Lord loves our agency. He gives us a principle. He lets us decide. He lets us decide not just how we want to eat, but what kind of blessings we want, right? What's important to us? Would we rather have a life blessed with all those foods I showed you earlier, or would we rather have a life blessed with good health? I think it's an honest decision the Lord leaves in our hands. We can decide what kind of blessings we want. It's fun to eat those foods. I like to eat those foods too. I happen to be one person, I'd rather have good health, but I do not blame anyone who would just rather eat those foods. So in my ward, they have a brother who just very, very overweight, has all kinds of health issues, and was flabbergasted that they were trying to eat such a healthy diet. He said, I don't want to eat that way. I want to live life to the fullest. Well, he's living life to the fullest, and it's uncomfortable living your life that way, but hey, sometimes people are just doing all they can just to survive, and sometimes food is their one, particularly for Latter-day Saints, we don't get to do anything else fun, do we? Food is the one thing. Food is the one thing, and they're like, don't take that from me. I don't blame a single person. We've all got struggles, but God really wants to give us all His blessings, even if we don't want to take all of them. But He's going to keep offering it. How do I get off on that? The second part of the principle, only in times of winter or cold or famine. That's what's pleasing to the Lord. Reiterated then in verse 15. And these, meaning the beasts of the field, the fowls of the air, all wild animals, have God made for the use of man only in times of famine and excess of hunger. Well, why is it pleasing to God that meat be used only in times of winter, cold, famine, or excess of hunger? Why is that? Is it for our physical health? Is it for the welfare of the animals? Is it for the planet or the environment? Well, we can study this prayerfully, and then that helps us then to apply this principle to other animal foods. They're not listed in the word of wisdom. Last principle, all grain is ordained for the use of man and beast to be the staff of life. All grain is good for the food of man. Staff of life is an English idiom meaning staple food. According to Oxford English Dictionary, staple means having the chief place among the articles of production or consumption. In other words, grains ordained to have a chief place amongst the foods that we eat is to provide, in essence, the bulk of the calories, and that's exactly what's done throughout the history of the world. We're all well aware that grains really are the staff of life. Rice in Asia, wheat in Europe, maize or corn in Central and South America. Well, why did the Lord ordain grain to be the staff of life? Here's another tremendous, wonderful opportunity we have to study the principle prayerfully, to do the scientific research ourselves, and then we can apply this principle and we can use it to help us handle all the very confusing, contradictory messages we get on the media. So here's the three principles. Are these part of the word of wisdom that the Lord expects us to follow? They're the words of the Lord. They're in the word of wisdom, Doctrine and Covenants, section 89. I think the church has been very clear about what the minimum standard of worthiness is. And so we know what that is. But I think it's interesting that the church is increasingly presenting a more holistic view of the word of wisdom. Here's from last August 2019, an official church statement on the word of wisdom. Notice the first two lines. The word of wisdom is a law of health for the physical and spiritual benefit of God's children. It includes instructions about what foods are good for us and the substances to avoid. So notice they don't just say, the word of wisdom tells us which substances to avoid. It includes both parts, right, in this statement. And that's true of most or all official statements I know about the word of wisdom. If you look at the official statement of the Gospel Topics essay on the word of wisdom, this is what it says. Look and preach my gospel. Look in the August 2019 issue of the Ensign, whole big sections on the word of wisdom. This is what it says. So, to be clear, the prohibitions that have been interpreted by church leaders they've given a specific meaning. And that's been clarified for us. Why did they clarify it for us? They didn't clarify it for the first, few decades. Finally, they had to clarify it because to get the saints on board. I don't think that's true of the rest of the Dietary Council. The church has not clarified it. I don't think they're going to clarify it. If they do, they're going to have major uprising, rebellion. But we get to clarify it for ourselves if we want the blessings. So when we go in for our next temple recommended interview, the bishop's not going to give us a long list of do's and don'ts about the word of wisdom. The bishop's going to what? Simply ask us, do you understand and obey the word of wisdom? I hope when it gets to that point, each of us will be able to give a very enthusiastic yes, and also be able to bear testimony about the blessing it's been to us. And I'll just conclude by bearing my testimony. I changed my diet because I saw it made such complete sense. I thought I would rather eat different foods and enjoy much better health. So I changed my diet. But the thing that has brought me by far the most joy is to see how the words of the Doctrine and Covenants have been fulfilled for me personally in my life. Those blessings that we saw, those precious blessings of wisdom, hidden treasures of great knowledge, feelings of being close to the Spirit. If I could just sum up my experience and why I'm so passionate about this, is because doing these things has not just brought great physical health. I didn't have big health problems in the first place, but I lost all this weight, and all the few little health issues I had, which would have become major, all disappeared. That's one thing. But the spiritual blessings, the mental clarity, the better ability to associate with other people, the joy of sharing this message, what has brought me is joy. The word of wisdom to me is joy. And yes, I do feel like it's helped me become much more close and one with my Savior. For this, I'm so grateful. I'm grateful for all of you. Thank you for being here. I say it's in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.